Oh, hey, hello there. I'll be right with you. I just had to take care of a little task up there. What's that? Changing the light bulb. No. Oh, because you saw me with the light bulb and you assumed I was changing the light bulb. Actually, no, battery, smoke alarm. So, wanted to make sure that we had fresh batteries in there. But it's easy. I could understand how you could see something and jump to a conclusion and have beliefs and assumptions all wrapped around some data that was observed but maybe misapplied. Let me get this ladder out of the way and we'll get started. Welcome back. My name is Vic Bonacci and I'll be your barista today. Here at the Coffeehouse, I like to provide ideas and tips or tools that are small enough that we can cover them within the span of a coffee break, yet impactful, just like that double espresso. It packs a punch, which will enable you to take this idea back to your place of work and hopefully leverage it so you can add a little bit more sanity to your world of work. Today's feature is something called the Ladder of Inference, and this was created by Chris Argyris. Now, the Ladder of Inference is a mental model or a metaphor that helps us identify any misguided beliefs before they get us into trouble. In fact, in my Agile Coach's toolkit, the Ladder of Inference is also one of the cards that I've put in there so that when I'm talking with other coaches or scrum masters or people in my organization, we can rifle through these cards, pull something like this out, the Ladder of Inference, and have a discussion about it. In his seminal book, The Fifth Discipline, Peter Senge actually calls out Chris Argyris for creating a number of these mental models. Although he doesn't talk about the Ladder of Inference specifically, Peter Senge does call out the fact that Argyris's action science offers methods for examining the reasoning that underlies our actions. I'm going to talk more about Peter Senge and the Fifth Discipline in a future video, I'm sure. But what is the Ladder of Inference, and how is it helpful to us with our teams? On its face, the Ladder of Inference is a metaphor. At the base, on the ground level, is this pool of everything, all facts, everything that can be measured or observed. And it's available to anybody who takes the time to look at it. But once you start climbing up the rungs of the ladder, you begin to abstract or step further away from this available pool of data. Put your foot on the first step. What Argyris is saying is that now you are selecting which data you would like to observe. Of everything that's out there, you might be focusing on a specific data set or fact amongst the sea of facts. And that's fine. Human beings are pattern recognizing machines, and we do that so that we don't have to spend so much capacity of our brains always thinking about every little detail. So much of our thinking is on autopilot because we recognize these patterns, and so if something is outside the pattern, naturally we're going to focus on that so that we can survive. But in this step, by taking that first step up the ladder, what you're doing is you're identifying which of the data I'm going to focus on. Now the next step to abstract, the second rung, is attaching meaning to something. You attach meaning based on your cultural or personal background. And that's really all it says, is you're attaching some meaning based on what you're seeing in the data that you've decided to observe. And again, that follows that pattern recognizing ability of humans. Further steps would include going from attaching meanings to making assumptions, drawing conclusions, forming beliefs, and then taking actions upon those beliefs. So you can see you can get many steps high on the ladder, well above the actual observations or the data that was truly present at the time. Let's walk through a scenario. Say, for example, you're working with a few different teams and it's time to do a presentation. So there you are in front of maybe 2 or 3 teams, some stakeholders in the company, some leaders, other people all around paying attention to what you're saying. In fact, you're scanning the audience and just about everyone is either looking at you or they're looking at the presentation on the screen right behind you, except for Dave. Dave is one of the stakeholders that you have an affinity for. You know that Dave has been asking questions about your project and the process all along the way, but now, today, as you're presenting, you observe that Dave is, instead of looking up here, he's looking down at his phone. Interesting, he's typing away. Now, you make this observation in real time, so you don't stay on it necessarily so much, but as you're wrapping up your presentation, you still glance at Dave and you see he's still on his phone. The meaning that you automatically associate to Dave being on his phone is that he's fidgeting and he's probably just not paying attention. So the meaning says Dave's not paying attention. The assumption you make after that, you say to yourself, is, well, he must be bored. The conclusion you might jump to from there is, if he's bored, Dave doesn't see any value in the work that I'm presenting here. That's the assumption now, is that Dave doesn't see any value. And from that assumption, you can go on to form a conclusion that Dave isn't really an ally of ours after all. He's not getting what we're doing. He's not involved. He's out and out ignoring us. So going forward, the action that you might jump to then, based on this belief that he's not an ally, the action is, we're just not going to share anything. We're not going to go out of our way to keep Dave in the loop. And speaking of loop, this jump downward from this belief stage will form what's called a reflexive loop, because any beliefs that you have could inform that early rung, which data do you select in future events. So again, extending our scenario here, because you believe Dave is not an ally, that means that next time you see Dave, you're going to be biased in what you observe from interactions with Dave or how Dave is behaving, and just find data that supports your belief that says Dave is not an ally. Now, you could easily diffuse this misinformation, this misalignment, by asking, say, an open-ended question of Dave. Hey, Dave, what did you think of our presentation? That sounds simple enough. Really powerful question. You can also test your assumption of, was he bored, by asking him straight out, were you bored? Or you could test some of the observable data, the data that you yourself observed at the time. I noticed you were very quiet. You were focused on your phone. Now, Dave might come back and say, yeah, this stuff really gets me going. I'm so into what you're doing. I was trying to take notes to keep up. I've got so many questions. I wanted to take those back to my desk and fully form some questions. So now you can see, in asking Dave directly and challenging some of the assumptions, testing the data that you had, he can come back in an open-ended way without being biased by you saying, Dave, I don't think you're an ally, or you weren't paying attention. Instead of accusing him and putting Dave on the defensive, you're just asking these open-ended questions or testing some of the data that you've discovered. So you can embed this ladder of inference within your team. By practicing it, you can activate this skill of critical thinking within your team. There's something really powerful about talking out loud what the links are or the steps you take as you go up the ladder. And if you talk it out with your team, then what you're doing is you're sharing them the way that you think through a situation or a scenario. Now, they may or may not agree with your ultimate conclusions, but at least they can appreciate the steps you take in your thinking. You can also surprise yourself by speaking it out loud or going through a diagram of how you got to here from there, and you might find flaws in your own logic as well. Finally, I want to say that you can use this ladder of inference in three ways. First of all, you can use it for reflection, becoming more aware of your own thinking and reasoning. Secondly, advocacy. Make your thinking and reasoning more visible to others. And last, inquiry. Looking into others' thinking and reasoning to try to get an understanding of what makes them different from you. I hope you enjoyed this quick look at the Ladder of Inference. If you want more information, you can certainly go to my website, agilecoffee.com/ladder of inference, and find other tools that can help you when you're working with teams, form better mental models, and activate your critical thinking. Until next time, I just want to leave you with another quick thought, and that is, here we are in the coffee house, trying to help each other by communicating, by building a community, and by talking about some of these tools that I term my own Coach's Toolkit. If you want to be part of the conversation, I highly encourage you to please participate in the comments below. Liking this video and subscribing to the channel helps get this content in front of others and increases the overall conversation so that we together can improve the world of work. Lastly, if you have it within your means, I encourage you to help us out by visiting our Patreon page at patreon.com/agilecoffee. And you can contribute to the tiny tip jar. Every couple of cents from anybody helps us out a lot. Until next time, I'm your barista Vic, reminding you to enjoy your coffee with friends.